Welcome. So glad you could join us again for the Grief Healing Telesummit. Top experts share their best holistic healing methods to transform grief into healing and living again. I'm Chelsea Hansen, your host, founder of With Sympathy Gifts and Keepsakes, as well as Global Grace, the World Association of Spiritual Grief Healing. We have another talented guest for you today, Michael Mapes. Michael is going to be talking to us about the power of intuition and how we can use that to transform our grief into healing. Specifically, Michael is a business coach, and he's traveled the world providing psychic readings as well as coaching intuitives, healers, coaches, and other heart-based business owners, as well as leading workshops on spiritual marketing and spiritual business development. And Michael's gift is that he's able to quickly identify energetic and practical blocks to healing to provide you with simple and easy-to-implement strategies designed to help you bring your powerful message of transformation and healing into the world. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit of how you got involved in your line of work, being an intuitive person? Did that gift just come to you naturally, or how did you figure that all out?
Of course, yeah. So I actually told my preschool teacher when I was 5 years old that I was a psychic, and I'm not sure how I knew that word or knew what that meant. I mean, I was raised in an open-minded family, but it wasn't like I had really been around that. And so that's really where it started for me. Had a lot of experiences growing up. I would know things before they happen. I was very comfortable making decisions from more of an emotional or an intuitive place. And even when people would, not really understand that, I was very confident that those decisions would work out. I would feel people after they passed on. So I had a lot of experiences growing up. And I was lucky enough to have a mother who she didn't encourage it, but she also didn't discourage it. And I think that was really the best approach that someone could take. And if there are people who have, children or children in their family somewhere who are intuitive or who are exhibiting psychic abilities, I would say that's really the best approach, because I think had she pressured me to use it too much, I would have really turned away from it. I wouldn't have felt right. I would have felt kind of like, monkey in the circus. But had she discouraged it, I would have felt a lot of shame. And so it was a very loving approach, but it was also a very hands-on approach. And for me, that really worked. All that being said, I didn't think, even though I was very comfortable with this, I would share these gifts with my friends and with my family, I didn't think that this would be my line of work. I didn't think that I would have a career as an intuitive or anything like that. And so I graduated high school. I went to college. My plan was to ultimately go to law school. And I ended up losing somebody very close to me. I actually lost my aunt, and we had a really special relationship, and we always had since I'd been very young, and it was really sudden. So it was like she was here 1 minute and she was gone the next. And because I was at college, it ended up really being kind of a whirlwind for me. I flew to the funeral, and then I had to fly right back to college, and I didn't really understand that, grief was a whole process that kind of hits you in waves and in different ways. So I just sort of went about my daily life having never really dealt with this, and I started to kind of spiral downward into a pretty depressed place, into a pretty negative and self-destructive place. And she ended up visiting me one night after she passed, and she said, I'm here. She gave me some details about my family that I hadn't previously known, that I was able to later confirm. And she said, it's time to use your gift in a bigger way. It's time to bring your gift to the world. You're going to travel, you're going to speak, and you're going to do readings for people. And I thought, well, that's lovely, but there's no way I'm going to do that. It just did not. I was 19. It just did not seem like realistic or like even something that I was sure if I wanted to do. I've always had a strong drive to help people, but I didn't really think about like that this would be the way to do that. Anyway, 6 months later, just through a very weird turn of events, I ended up launching my first business and doing professional readings for people. And so that's really how I got to where I was. It was really through grieving and grief that I was really led to step into this.
That's really neat that you were open to your aunt's messages and believed they were helpful, real. But then I guess you did say you always trust your intuition, so that's awesome. So, so tell us, like, for your first business for doing readings, like, how did you launch it? Like, how did you tell people who weren't members of your family or your friends, this is what I do?
In the beginning, I really kind of almost hid behind my ability because in the beginning, I needed a lot of proof. Like, it wasn't just about, like, proving it to other people. It was also about, like, proving it to me. It's one thing to say, oh, you know, I get some intuitive feelings and I make decisions on those feelings, and occasionally I know things before they happen. It's a much different thing to say, you know, day after day I'm going to put myself on the line and really help people in these very kind of like grown-up situations. So I'd like end up helping people with things that, like, I mean, were way more serious than anything I had experienced in my own life. I actually began by, you know, doing something like, I don't know what it was, but like a few dozen readings for people for free. And essentially my thought process was, I will do these, I will prove that there's nothing to this, and then I will go back to my life.
Oh,
and that will be
yeah,
fine.
Okay.
And then that wasn't what happened. I got overwhelming evidence that I had abilities. And I also really committed to getting better. I mean, I'm a big believer in, like, working on yourself, whether it's personally or professionally, because when you do that, you learn so many things about yourself. So it's really a process of figuring out how these abilities work. How can I use them? I mean, I did go back to college as well, so I didn't have a huge pressure to grow my business in the beginning. You know, that really came later in my journey. So I just would really serve the people that came to me and was able to build up a pretty decent sized business. But yeah, in the beginning, it was so much less about me and so much more about just let me help you with these abilities. And if these abilities can serve you. As I've grown and as I've evolved, I've really come to share so much more of my story, so much more of my personal journey along with using those abilities.
And I have a question too. You, being the psychic or the medium, intuitive, you're kind of like, I want to, you know, just test this out. Maybe nothing will come of it. I'll go back to my regular life. You know, and you're the one with the abilities kind of question them initially, but then you learn, no, this is the real deal. I can really help people. What do you tell, like, just the average Joe person who's like, oh, you know, I don't know if I should visit a medium or not. Will they be able to help me? Because they might be skeptical or afraid. So how do you help people with that block?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And so much of it for me in the beginning was I just felt like if I'm going to do this professionally, there's a certain standard that I need to bring to my work. Not that I felt like I could never make a mistake, because people make that in any profession, you know, but just that I felt like there was a level of consistency that I really needed to bring. And I really had no models for this. I mean, even in the last 10 years, there's just been an explosion of consciousness around intuition and psychic abilities. Even 10 years ago, it's not that there wasn't information, but it was way harder to know, like, what was good quality information. And I think a lot of that is shifting. Not that you don't have to be discerning. You absolutely do. But I just think there's so much more awareness of this now. And in fact, you know, even modern science is starting to validate so much of what many of us knew, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so what I would say, though, to someone who's really looking to get a reading from someone is first off, I'm a big believer that we shouldn't give our power away to other people. So I don't believe that with whatever way you go about dealing with grief, whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching, whether it's meditation, whether it's, you know, going to a medium, like none of these things, like there's no magic potion, you know, to like skip ahead on your journey. So I really believe that you need to be centered in your own power when you go to somebody. Like, just because somebody has psychic or medium or intuitive before their name, it doesn't mean you should be aggressive and overly skeptical. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that you should totally abdicate your power and say, oh, because somebody told me something, it means that it's true. So the first thing that I would say is use good sense. Like, find somebody that you resonate with, that you feel good about. And don't just find somebody because maybe they were the first hit on Google. If you resonate with that person, great, absolutely. But really trust your intuition, even in the process of selecting a person with a message for you. The second thing that I would say, if you're really looking to go to a medium, is do a little bit of self-reflection and self-examination about what place you're in, right? Because so often we just see mirrored back to us that which we expect. So if you are in a place of a lot of anger and a lot of resentment, it's okay. Don't judge yourself. It's completely okay to be in that place, right? Like, I've been in that place in my life. But it may not be the exact right moment for you to go to a medium, because that person may just be kind of validating your story that the world's a really cruel, mean, hard place at the moment. So really take stock of, am I in a place to be able to receive this? And I would say that same thing with, therapy, that same thing with coaching. Like, are you in a place to be able to receive the help that the universe might give you through someone else? So I would do some self-examination. The third thing is, I believe that the universe can get messages to us in lots of ways. And going to a medium and a psychic, that's just one way. So if you resonate with that, beautiful. Or if you're really willing to have an open mind and to give it a try, absolutely get a recommendation or find somebody that can serve you. But if you know that this really isn't for you, then don't feel like a pressure that you have to do that at all. And the final thing that I would really say is really keep an open mind. I mean, mediumship is not even the best medium in the world, right? Like, we can only give you what comes through to us. And so often that's a transformational, completely healing message. But other times, like, you may hear from a different loved one. You may get a message that you don't understand at the moment, but you'll understand it a week from now or a year from now. So it's not all about just what you get in that moment. So really go in with an open mind and be willing to receive what that person says. If it works for you, fantastic. If it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Just release it. The universe is going to get a message of healing through to you in another way. But I would really say, have an open mind, and as much as you can, be unattached to the information that comes through. So often what happens is people come in for a reading, and they so desperately want to hear one thing. And 50 other great messages will come through, but because it wasn't that one thing that you wanted to hear, you'll discount those. And to me, that's really dismissing a lot of healing that the universe is desperately trying to give you. Because the universe is not trying to make life hard for you. It truly isn't. I know it can feel like it, but it really isn't. It wants you to heal. It wants you to be healthy, and it wants you to be happy. So don't think that just because you feel that you need one thing, that's what you absolutely need. Like, a good medium may give you other brilliant things that are so much more healing than anything you could come up with on your own.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such helpful information. And then, I just wanted to put my little commentary in. Like, years ago, I lost my mom, and I remember seeing, I think it was John Edwards on TV, or John Edwards, the psychic. And I was like, oh, my God, I want to go see this person because I would love to connect to see if this is really true. And this was a long time ago, and this was before, like how you said 2 years ago, this has really become more mainstream. So this was probably at least 10 years ago now. So, but what I like is that there are people right in your city or state that can help you. You don't have to go to some national person and hope, to even try to get in, and so I just think it's so neat that the word is out, that other people have these tools besides the few people we see who choose fame to spread their gifts, So I think that's awesome that it's readily available to anyone who would like to explore this.
Yeah, and I would add to that just a little bit, which is conversely, don't feel that just because somebody's in your area, you have to go to them. Because what I really look at is I totally hear your point about the national medium. And there are so many talented mediums and psychics out there. There is no reason that you need to go wait in an auditorium to perhaps get a 5-second reading. If that resonates with you and that's great and you want to experience that, beautiful. Because part of what those mediums do, I think, is on a very large scale, show us what's possible. And that can be very healing. Like, that's very healing for me to see. Other people get those messages, even if I'm not getting one. But if you're in that place where you really need that personal message, again, like Chelsea's saying, you can absolutely look for someone in your area, but there's a whole nother, I guess I would say, second tier of mediums and psychics who are as talented as the national mediums, but maybe don't have the platform. So again, like, just spend a little bit of time doing your research, looking at their testimonials. So many, mediums are on telesummits or radio shows that listen to their voice. Are you going to be able to receive it? So really find that person who's absolutely like the best for you. But I think you're exactly right, Chelsea. You don't have to wait, months and months and months or spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to be able to get a great reading.
Right, and then even when I say in your area, I forget to mention, of course, there's Skype, so you can talk to anyone wherever they might be, how you're saying, after you do your research. So I think that's just so nice that possibility is there for people if of interest.
Because you can approach it from a real place of, I want to find the best person, right? Like, sometimes people will call me and they'll say, oh, I want to work with someone in my area. And I'll say, well, why don't you just work with the person who's really best for you, And so I think that, like, that's really the gift of technology, that there, you may be a medium in the Philippines or a medium in Australia or a medium in Russia who's really right for you, and you can basically be instantly connected. So powerful.
And then now tell us, like, for just us regular people, let's say, who haven't tapped into our intuitive abilities, how will that help us to cope with grief? Or can you give us maybe some tips on what we should look for or simple techniques?
Yeah, of course. And one of the things that I work with a lot of people on, whether they're my business clients or they're not my business clients, is how to get more connected to their intuition. And it's probably my motivating and driving force, because going to a medium is great, going to an intuitive is great, but being able to, anytime that you want, connect to spirit, connect to source, connect to God, connect to your higher self, whatever language you use around that, whatever language you use to describe that force, which is greater than yourself, being able to connect to that on demand is so powerful. And being able to connect to that on demand is really our birthright. I mean, we all come into this world completely connected to source, completely connected to our intuition. It's everything that happens after the moment that we're born that disconnects us from that disconnects us from our potential and from our power and from really listening to our intuition. And I think, luckily that's changing now as parents get more awareness and as we have conversations like this exact conversation that we're having. But and many times what happens is when you have a loss or when someone passes, you feel things shift for you and you feel called to live your life in a different way. So you feel called to explore, some of these questions. You feel called to explore your own purpose and what your life is about. You can also go the other way. You can also, become really bitter and resentful and closed off. And it's not like one way is right and the other way is wrong. Like, it's all part of whatever unique journey a person is on. But I know that for many people listening to this, if you're really dealing with grief, you may already be feeling a little bit more emotionally raw, a little bit more vulnerable, and a little bit more open to your intuitive side than you ever have. So often what I find is that people feel their loved ones around after they pass, and it's very palpable, it's very tangible, it's a very real feeling. And yet, because we are so raised to think about, like, if you can't see, feel, and touch it and show it to someone else, it doesn't exist, right? That we really discount that, even though the feeling is often more real than anything that we've ever felt. So I think that intuition, first off, it really lets you know that you're not alone. And I think that when you're grieving, when you're going through something, like when I went through this experience with my aunt, I felt so isolated and I felt so alone, and I didn't have the words to really describe the feeling. And so I just went into this mode of like, everything's fine, and telling everybody that everything was fine, and putting on this very defensive thing. And what I've come to understand, having recently, lost my grandfather now 10 years later, is that when you are really connected to your intuition, that whole process becomes a much more loving process, both because you don't feel so alone, but also because you're just much more open to receive the love and support of others in a way that I really wasn't when I had, my first experience with death and when my aunt passed. So for me, being open to your intuition, it just lets you know that it's absolutely impossible for anyone to be alone in the world. If you're not connected to your intuition, if you're not connected to that which is greater than yourself, then you're really just out there alone. You're just kind of paddling upstream, right? And so it's all dependent on you to get it right, to say the right things, to make the right arrangements, to like really be all powerful. And that's really nonsense. I mean, you just can't maintain that for very long. When you're able to really surrender that and feel that you're very connected to the universe, your whole experience, not only with grief, but your life more generally, really transforms, and it really shifts. And you're able to see that, yeah, maybe this experience doesn't feel that pleasant. Maybe it feels horrible, right? And it absolutely does, and that's very authentic, and that's very real. But even so, you're able to connect to there's some reason, some purpose, some greater divine thing that's happening here. And it's not, and the thing is, this is a personal journey. So often what I see is people want to impose this on others who are grieving to make them feel better. That's not what this is about, right? Like, I don't believe in going up to grieving people and saying, oh, this happened for a reason. That's not useful. This is an individual and personal process that I'm talking about. But when you are connected to your intuition, you really come to understand that there's a deeper sense of connection, and there's a grander design and a grander plan to what we're experiencing. And so that's how I find it very healing. I want to give you, Chelsea, and your listeners, a really, really simple technique that you can use, because okay. I can hear it right now, what people are saying. It's like, oh, they're like, that's great for Michael. He's been intuitive all of his life. But the thing is, it's like being intuitive doesn't mean I don't have to do my work, and it doesn't mean that I get a shortcut. I feel and experience all of this stuff. I have, like, stomped my foot at the universe and said, why me? I don't want these gifts anymore. Like, I have been the ultimate victim when it comes to my gifts as well. So I get it. But if you're thinking like, oh, it's just so easy when someone's intuitive, that's not really the case. But what it does do is it just allows you to navigate the whole process with a little bit deeper sense of serenity. And so I want to give everybody a really simple technique. It does not matter if you think of yourself as psychic. It does not matter if you think of yourself as intuitive. It does not, like, my sister uses this technique, and she often describes herself as intuitive as a rock. So you can really use this technique pretty simply. So what I advise people to do, like, if you're really dealing with grief, if you're really having a hard day, and I like to do this right away in the morning, but you really can do it, anytime. It doesn't matter. A lot of my clients like to do it before bed. But you just get a sheet of paper or, a journal if you have one. You can also do it on your computer, although I like pen to paper for this. But, you can absolutely do it on your computer as well. You want to date the entry, whatever the date is, and I also like to write the time. And then you're going to write a question at the top. And while you're doing this, you just want to breathe, and you want to be very present, and you don't want to judge yourself. Don't make yourself wrong. Don't make yourself feel silly, anything like that. So you're just going to go, and on the top of the paper, you're going to write, what is it that I most need to know to aid me in my healing process? So what would most aid me in my healing process right now? And then you're just going to write and journal. And usually, I like to write for 2-3 minutes. You can write less, you can write longer. And if you just really trust, the universe is going to give you exactly what you need to heal. It's not going to give you everything that you need to have a perfect, amazing, easy life, but it's going to give you the piece of information that's going to allow you to take the next step on your healing journey. And that's really what intuition does. It doesn't give us the full picture of our entire life. We're not spiritually mature enough to receive that, but it gives us enough information to be able to take the next step on our journey. this technique is really powerful. I mean, I've used this in like every area of my life, but I wanted to share it with you because I thought it was particularly applicable to grief.
And can you repeat the question for us one more time?
Yep. What is it I most need to know to aid me in my healing process?
And then you recommend the people just jot their notes for 2 to 3 minutes, so don't make it burdensome, just what naturally flows. And then when you say use this technique in other areas of your life, you might change the question and say, what do I most need to know to propel my business forward? Or just, is that how you would change it for your other areas?
Yep, absolutely. Or to find my perfect relationship, or to, drop 10 pounds. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
But the thing is, we're so attached to what we want to know. Like, we make up all these stories about who we need to be and how things need to happen. When you ask the question, what do I most need to know, it really shifts that, because all of a sudden you're out of this is how I think I need to heal, and you're into what would really authentically serve me here.
And then I would imagine some of your clients or the people you work with must be surprised by the answers they get when they do this exercise.
Hugely, because we think of intuitives and psychics as special people, and really nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we're all special, but really it's like the universe on any given day is downloading so much information into your brain, into your body. It's constant. Some of us are just really good at shutting that off or ignoring that. And we have free will, right? We have free will. So being intuitive doesn't mean that you don't have choice in your life or that you don't have decisions to make. It just means that the universe will give you information to make the best decision. Whether you take that or not is up to you. And intuition is a muscle. So the more that you work with it, the more that time you spend with it, the more that you strengthen it, the more you do this exercise, then the better you're going to get at being able to trust and listen to that information. It's definitely hard in the beginning. But I would just encourage people, don't just do this one time. Like, really, do it repeatedly, once a week or a couple times a week, and you'll really be amazed at what starts to come through for you.
And even, like, if you're taking a little break at your desk, at your work, at your office, just take 2 to 3 minutes to do this, It'll probably make you feel better in the middle of your day or whatever.
Completely, because I don't know about you, but do you ever have, like, those moments where in the middle of your day and it's not going well, and then, like, you don't stop and take a time out, and it just continues to get worse? It's like, that's because we're disconnected from spirit. That's because we're disconnected from our inner intuitive voice. If you take 5 minutes out to say, what is it I need to know to transform the course of my day, things will change. The problem is we don't. We get caught on an ego trip, and it's really hard to stop ourselves. Or so I think that it really gets you out of your present circumstances, and it gets you into what could really be possible for me in this moment.
Yeah, and it's so cool that that's just such a simple technique. Anyone can do it. Simple, easy. There would be no reason not to try it, just give it a try, right?
Yeah, completely. And that's the thing, right? Like, there are, you can take this kind of as far as you want, right? Like, there are lots of classes. Like, I have a course on intuitive development, and there are amazing books and workshops. And if you feel called to that, absolutely invest in that for yourself. But if you don't, there are so many simple things that are not going to cost you any money that you can do. And I think that's really important to remember, because our ego will always tell us this has to be hard. This has to be complicated. Who are you to do this? I mean, it will always create a story for you in which you shouldn't take the action that will actually serve you. But really, there are, like, having a technique like this, and there are a lot of others. I mean, this is not the only way, but having some technique that can just get you recentered and reconnected to really the truth of who you are, I find it to be very powerful.
And how do you help people who are telling themselves the stories from their ego? They probably don't know that's really what they're doing. How do you bust out of these stories? What do you suggest people do there?
Yeah, so I suggest that they write a different story. Because any time that you want to transform something in your life, it doesn't matter if it's a business, it doesn't matter if it's a relationship, it doesn't matter if it's grief, it really doesn't matter. Anytime that you want to transform a situation in your life, you have to be able to think outside of where you are. And most people really can't do this. They can only make decisions and reactions based on what they see around them. And if you do that, you're just going to be battered back and forth for your entire life. So if you want to get outside of your story, you need to think about, who would I like to be? What would I like things to be like? So often what I'll encourage people to do is write down their life as they see it. Write down that story. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't feel real. It absolutely does. I mean, I used to be broke and really miserable. That felt pretty real to me at the time. But
sure.
until I thought outside of that, I couldn't really do anything to transform it. So if you're really, really stuck in just a stream of negative thinking, if you're really, really stuck in your story, write down that story as you see it. I just did this with a client the other day. She sent me an email about everything she couldn't do. And I said, this is your story. It's very real. I'm not judging it, but I'm not invalidating it either. I want you to go and I want you to write the opposite of this. What would you like your life to be? What, in an ideal world, right? So write a different story. And then you look at the two and you think, okay, so which one do I really want to live, right? Most
sure.
of us really want to live that hard story. And then you start to say, well, if this is a story that I want to live, right? If I want to be happy and wealthy and healthy and whole and creative or whatever it is for you, what would I have to do today? What would have to be different about me today to be able to step into that? And you can't do it all at once, but you can always make a couple of little tweaks or a couple of little changes. So if you feel, for instance, in grief, for me, I felt very isolated and very alone, right? So had I done this, I would have written that out, and that would have been my story, and I would have said what I would like to feel is, connected and supported. Well, what could I do today to feel connected and supported? Well, I probably could have reached out to some friends who I'm going to guess would be more than willing to help me. I could have found a support group, people who had been through the same thing that I was to connect with. Now, you can find so much of that online and connect with people. So there's so many things that we can do, but if you don't write out the opposite of where you are, you may never come to awareness about that.
Yeah, that's an awesome way to do it. And I like how you say just do little tweaks each day, because otherwise it would seem just way too overwhelming, I would assume,
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, I truly believe that whether a situation is an obstacle or opportunity has nothing to do with the situation and everything with who you decide to be in relationship to that situation. And too often, we just miss these beautiful opportunities because they come to us in the form of hardship. And so you have to have, and we all do, because it's very easy to get just stuck in our ego. It's very easy. I don't care how much spiritual work you've done, it's easy. So that's why you want to have these processes in place so that when the hard moment hits, you have a place to go. It's not a challenge to do one of these processes when you feel really good. That's really easy, and that's not really when you need them. You really need a process like this when things are not going well. And that's where spiritual discipline comes in, right? What action are you going to take to shift the way that you think or the way that you feel or the way that you relate to it?
Yeah, that's awesome that you point out really when you need this is when you're feeling the worst. So that's a perfect way to turn it around. That's awesome. It's so interesting that you have all these techniques that help people in their everyday life, which helps, of course, with their business life, if they're grieving, whatever the situation is. So you're saying you can apply it to really whatever's happening. So that's awesome. And
I think it's true.
And then let me ask you on a different topic. We're talking about connecting with our spiritual self, our higher self, God, whatever term we use. How do you suggest people connect with their deceased loved one if they would like to try that themselves?
Yeah, well, I think the first and most important thing is kind of what we were talking about when you go to see a medium. It's really releasing your attachment to what this needs to look like, right? And to what this needs to feel like. Because so often, Like what will happen when people are, people will call me and they'll say, well, my friend had a dream about their loved one and I haven't had a dream about my loved one, so why does my loved one on the other side not want to communicate with me? And it's like you really want to release your attachment to what you think this needs to look like. We are all so unique. We all perceive information so differently. So the way that one person gets a message is not the way that another person gets a message. And some of where I think the conversation around modern mediumship really fails is there's this sense of if you're not getting 100 obvious signs that your loved ones don't really care about you. And nothing could be further from the truth. We all have our own journey. I always think of, there's this line in Conversations with God that says, Jesus didn't heal those people that he healed because he saw something wrong with them. He healed them because that healing process was part of their journey, right? And so that's the same thing. For some people, getting really obvious signs is part of their journey. For other people, it's really not. But if you really feel strongly about getting a message from a loved one on the other side, very simply, the first thing I would do is ask. I would just say, give me a message. Give me something that I will absolutely know is you. And don't micromanage it and say it has to be X, Y, or Z, right? But just say, let it be obvious to me. Let it be obvious to me. Just let me know. So often this is a feeling in our body. It's a feeling of being supported. It's a feeling of being surrounded. It's a feeling of being loved. And often we just miss it because it wasn't a dream, or we didn't find a million pennies in one day, or whatever. And I think it's you really want to be open to the way that the universe is supporting you versus focusing on the way that it isn't. Because where you turn your attention has everything to do with the way that the experience unfolds for you. So it's when I work with people growing their business, it's let's not focus on all the places you don't have money. Let's focus on the places that you do. Same with the grieving process, right? You don't want to neglect or deny what you're going through, but also take a time to turn your attention to where are you healing? Where is the little place that you feel better today? What is the one action that you took that you could celebrate yourself for? So I'd say first, be unattached to what it needs to look like. Secondly, don't be afraid to ask for a sign from the universe. I think that's really important. And then thirdly, I would say really just be open. I mean, the moment that you ask, the universe is conspiring to send that to you. And so for me, that's really what it's about. There's another piece to this, which is trust, right? So oftentimes we get signs, but then it fades, because here's the thing, right? When our loved ones pass, they're at a higher level of consciousness. They're vibrating in a different way than we're vibrating. We still have to go on, and we still have to live our lives. And every single reading I've ever done, there is a component of it, which is our loved ones do not want us to obsess about them. They want us to use their passing as a way to more fully live our life and to experience more joy here. So it's absolutely healing to ask for these signs, but the thing is, you don't want to spend the rest of your life looking for signs from the other side, because there's a point where that gets in the way of you living. That gets in the way of what you're here to do. That gets in the way of your joy and your purpose. So honor your loved ones, celebrate the signs that do come. But also, I really believe in asking myself, when I look at my aunt, when I look at my grandfather in the past, it's what did these people teach me? What beautiful spiritual lessons did these people teach me? And how can I really embody those lessons as I go out into the world? And for me, that really living each day in resonance with the gifts that they gave me, that's how I truly honor them, and that's how I truly feel connected to them.
That is awesome. I wish everyone could get to that place. And I'm sure with time and practice we all could, but it's so neat that you can do that. That's awesome.
And it doesn't mean that you just arrive there and you're done, you have bad days, that's okay. Yeah. You have days where you lose sight of this, right? And so that's why I'm so passionate about just these really simple, easy things that you can do. There are days when I can't get there, right? There are days when I'm not going to be totally at peace with this. But you know what? I can at least go and do one of these really easy practices and start the process of getting myself back on track. Because as you do your inner work, all this stuff hits you in levels and layers, right? So you may think, oh, I've totally processed this, and then 5 years later, something comes up and triggers it. Well, it's not triggering it to punish you. It's being triggered because you've reached a new level of awareness. You've reached a new level of spiritual maturity, and now you're able to deal with that pain in a different way. So that's all that's happening, and that's where these processes help you. It's not about not experiencing it. This is not about putting on rose-colored glasses and telling everybody that everything's fine and lying to people, right? Like, positivity can keep people out as well. But this is just about being willing to take an action so that you don't stay stuck in the pain.
And then can you give us an example? Like, for your typical day, like, what are some of the things you do every day to keep yourself in this open, free place? I'm probably not quite describing it right, but how do you keep yourself connected every day?
Yeah, I think part of it is really realizing that anytime you're doing inner work, it doesn't, like, a lot of the inner work that I do with people is around money and sales and the fears that come up about that.
Sure.
But whether you're doing inner work around grief, whether you're doing inner work around love, like, if it's not somewhat uncomfortable for you, you're probably not really getting at what you need to get at, right? So part of it is, like, just be like, we are so addicted to feeling pleasant, and when we don't feel pleasant, we're so addicted to lying to people and telling them that we feel pleasant. And for me, there's nothing more authentic about false positivity than there is about accepted negativity. And so it's really about, for me, part of it is I'm very willing to be uncomfortable. So if I have a thought that makes me feel uncomfortable, or if I have a fear, if I have a bad moment, I don't rush to say, oh, I don't need to feel that. Or I don't rush to say, oh, I need to get back to feeling pleasant because I like feeling pleasant. That's really unhelpful. And what happens is we're so addicted to feeling pleasant that we end up cramming all of these, actual feelings we're having down. And any time that you do that, like energy, like you can't just short circuit that energy, right? It goes somewhere. You can bury it really deep. But what happens when we do that is that energy always comes out, and it always comes out at the most inopportune time. So we end up lashing out at someone else. We end up saying something we really regret. We end up doing something that's really self-sabotaging or self-destructive. So part of what I do is if I have a fear, if I have an unpleasant thought, if I, really feel like I'm struggling, I don't rush to tell myself that I'm bad or wrong for feeling that. I really allow myself to feel it. And if it's very strong, one thing I'll do is often just write to get it out. I'll just write all the craziness that I'm feeling. And so often just that process of taking it from within me and getting it onto paper really allows me to move beyond it. If writing, doesn't do it, I'll write it. I'll still get it out. It's so important for this energy to go someplace. And I'm not saying it doesn't always need to go to your friends and family, right? Like, you don't want to just splash your energy on everybody else around you all the time. And sometimes they wouldn't be gentle with it anyway. So sometimes just putting it to paper is a great way to get it out. If that's not enough for me, I'll get it on paper, I'll get that energy out, and then I'll just ask the universe to work a miracle on my behalf. Heal me. And again, so often we're attached to what that healing needs to look like. Wayne Dyer has a great line, which is, if I'm experiencing this, it must be part of my healing. And I really think about that, right? So, like, if you're experiencing anger or resentment, right, that's all right. That's all right. Like, sometimes a fever gets hotter before it breaks, right? So that you can really heal. So it's like I try to apply that thought. Like, if I'm experiencing this, it must be part of my journey. It must be part of my healing process. Because here's the thing, judgment and self-deprecation, that compounds all the work that you have to do. Like, judgment and putting yourself down and saying, I want to be over here and I'm not in the right place and I'm not healed enough, that does not support you in moving forward in life.
Sure, where you're saying you can even get into those feelings when you're trying to do your healing work, like, well, why aren't I more healed? Why don't I feel better by now? So you can even put the self-judgment into the healing world, so try to avoid that, you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the self-help community and the spiritual community in general has fallen into so many cliches because we want to have, an easy answer to tell someone. I mentioned one of them earlier, which is everything happens for a reason. It's like It's one thing to have that deep spiritual understanding for yourself. It's another to kind of impose that on someone else to say, oh, how dare you experience something other than a totally pleasant thought and not realize this happens for a reason. But that's kind of how we use it, right? And we'll often say, oh, I'm not manifesting fast enough. I'm not healing fast enough. Or I'm not as positive as this person over there, or we'll get really negative about the negative people in our life as if that's the solution, right? So it's like so often when we're going to this, we judge ourselves and we say, okay, I need to be over here because so-and-so's over there, because I really want to be over there. I know I'm capable of being over there. And all that does is it disconnects you from the present moment, and it disconnects you from what you could do in that moment to actually transform it. So, yeah, I think totally in the healing world, we can beat ourselves up. So often people will call me and they'll say, I've made my vision board, I've done my affirmations, I'm meditating, almost like they're trying to win some prize, for doing enough self-help work. And it's like, well, all of those things are beautiful tools. But what if you just got out of that for a minute? Like, how much love have you truly given yourself in the moment? We can sometimes I think we try to get our worthiness through, oh, if I just meditate enough, I just do enough affirmations. Well, that's not useful.
Sure, when you're saying the bottom line, well, I shouldn't say bottom line, it's coming down to how much love are you giving yourself during the process?
Yeah, completely. Are you gentle with yourself? Are you kind, with yourself? Are you forgiving of yourself? I mean, it's like so many random, ridiculous, out there thoughts come to me when I'm grieving or when I lose someone. And it's like, as I've gone through this now twice in my adult life, it's like the first time I was very hard on myself with that, thinking, how can you think that? That's wrong. That's not healthy. That, and that really just launched me into a very downward spiral. The second time I was so much more gentle. I just stepped back and I said, whatever is coming up is totally okay. It's just a completely different way to treat myself. It's the way that I would have treated someone else if they were going through that process, right? And so often we are more loving to others than we are to ourselves. So just think about how you might respond to your child if they were going through grief. Think about how you might respond to a friend, and then apply that to yourself. It really will profoundly change your experience.
Yeah, that's awesome info to give people, just to kind of give themselves, of course, permission. So I know we're getting to the end of our time. So tell me, there was some information or a gift you wanted to share with all the listeners as well today.
Yeah, and I really want to encourage all of your listeners to get this gift because, again, just like we were talking about a little bit ago, I know that there are some people who think, oh, this is all lovely for Michael, but this would never work for me. And this gift is really addressing that, and it's my Find Your Divine Truth report. I share in a little bit more detail my story and my journey, but I also give you a lot of simple, really easy to implement techniques, just like the ones that Chelsea and I were talking about here, that you can really start implementing today to start getting more connected to your intuition and to start getting more connected to your truth as you navigate your grief process, as you navigate your healing process. And it's not too long. It's around 15 pages, but there's a lot of great information in there. And you can just go to michaelmapes.org/Chelsea and download the gift. So my website, so michaelmapes.org/Chelsea. You'll just type in your name, you'll type in your email, and then we will email you a copy of the reports. And I'd love you to download it. I'd love you to write me and email me and let me know if this conversation or that report aided you in any way.
Yeah, that would be awesome for you to get the feedback because I'm sure the information you shared today will help many people because it's so simple. It's so easy to understand. Like, wow, this maybe really could make a difference if I give it a try. And then let me spell your last name for everyone just so they know, so they get it right. So it's just Michael Mapes, MAPES.org. So www.michaelmapes.org is where you can download that. And then last question to wrap us up. What is one message, if you could only give the listeners one message about healing themselves or getting through the grief journey, what is that one message?
I would say if I had to give you one message or one thing that would really, really help you on your healing journey, I would say trust yourself, trust your inner voice. I promise you it's there. It might be neglected, it might be small, but really listen and have the courage to just trust that you have within you all the resources, all the power, everything you need to navigate this journey.
What an awesome message to end the call with. And I keep using the word awesome. I sound like a broken record, but that's what I think this information is. I really appreciate your time today. You gave us a lot of great tools. And again, everyone, check out the free report Michael Mapes has told us about. And also check out his website, too, because I think there's a lot of other tools that could help you as well, because the tools he teaches can be applied really to whatever journey you are in your life, whether the grief, the business, relationship. So lots of great info. So thank you, Michael, for your time again. We really appreciate it. And take care, everyone.